what we'll do we'll do quickly here in a second is do just introduction, so people have a feel for who's on the call, and where you're from. We're going to talk about customers and commercialization, do an introduction to customer discovery, and we're going to talk about why this is so important, and the relevance to organizations like Rev1. Because a lot of the people that participate in Equalize in the past have been in the life sciences. We go through kind of my version of a target product profile and its relevance, especially as it feeds information for competitor assessment and analyses, and then an introduction to market assessment. These slides will all be available. Kristen has a copy of them, and there's a pretty good number of slides in the back that go into some more detail on market development and market analysis. So with that, why don't we just quickly go around, and Kristen, if you don't mind just going through the list and calling people out and having them introduce themselves.
Sure, I can do that, no problem. I can see everyone sort of turning their video on. Sorry if we're sort of throwing you off there. But I will go with people who have their video on first, just because I know that means that they are ready. So Paul Carter, who is a colleague of mine at WashU, would you like to start for us?
Yeah, hi, I'm Paul Carter, Business Development Director here at WashU, mostly focused on physical sciences, but also do med devices quite a lot here. So happy to hear what you have to say. Really encouraged to try to find better paths to commercialize the things that come out of our ecosystem. And we have a lot of talented women inventors, and I really think it's great to enable them.
Great, thank you, Paul. Catherine Pollard.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, excellent. Okay, great. Sorry, guys. I was just setting up my camera. Yeah, so I'm Katie Pollard. I'm with the University of Toledo, the Technology Transfer Office. My role is a licensing associate, and recently I've taken on a new role at the Launchpad Incubator, also associated with the University of Toledo, and there I'll be the interim associate director of venture development. So this area is just very interesting for me from the perspective of, I also want to be able to help our clients. So this type of information, I want to make sure that we're sending similar messages. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you for being here. It's always great to have another university that we don't necessarily work with on a daily basis. So thank you for coming.
Yes, thank you.
I'm just sort of going up. So Gustavo, would you like to go next?
Hi everyone. I think I'm the youngest probably and less experienced. So I am in Baltimore now, located in Johns Hopkins. I joined a program that is called Nucleate, that basically is an accelerator for startups. And we are in a student-run organization right now. And what we are doing is trying to attract tech sourcing that is in this area in Baltimore and DC. And we help them to create a venture actually. And because I am interested always in that side, and one day I would like to also start my own venture, trying to learn as much as I can about all of these different topics that we're going to see. But as well, we want to increase our diversity and inclusion in the program, right? And because we know that we still need to work a lot on that. So all the insights that I can get, to balance our program as well, to have everyone represented in the different teams that we want to form. So yeah, it is here to learn, and hopefully we can launch a really good program and help all the students that they have really great ideas. So yeah, nice to meet you all.
Nice to meet you too. Justine?
Can you hear me? I'm Justine Craigmeyer. I am here to learn. I'm eating my lunch, which is why I have my apron on my dress shirt so I don't spill. If anybody wants to design a apron that I can wear in the office at lunchtime, that would be great, because I'm going back to the office next week. But yeah, I'm here to learn. My real job is to meet with engineering alumni, and we do have alumni on our faculty and staff here at WashU. And I like to be able to report out to the alumni what's going on. And I also like to encourage other people about all the great opportunities from the Office of Technology and Management. So I'm here to eat and listen.
Thank you. And your role is critical too, Justine, because most of the women who apply for Equalize come back and tell us that I did this because someone else told me they thought I could do it. I heard about it from someone else. I got an email from you, but it was someone else who told me about it, whether it's a tech transfer colleague, an alum, or just someone who thought that they would be good for this. So thanks for being here. We appreciate that. I do see a picture from 2021, Kyu Sun Yoon, People's Choice Award winner. How are you today?
Sorry, I had to unmute. Great, thank you so much. And I love Equalize, obviously, and I'm still trying to learn as much as I can from Equalize. So I'm a co-founder of Empiri. Empiri is trying to change how we do cancer diagnosis, building a medical device, diagnostic assay, etc. I'm also a faculty at Houston Methodist, Weill Cornell Medical College. And I'm very interested in today's topic. Yep. That's why I'm here. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. And it's great. So if anyone has any questions specifically for what it's like to be a pitcher, maybe you can chime in later. We appreciate you being
Absolutely.
here. Thank you.
Except I have to leave at 1. So before then.
Don't worry about it. No problem. Let's see. I think I might have forgotten one person. If you haven't gone yet, go ahead and pop in.
Okay, I'll go. My name is Burnley Jaklovic, and I'm from UMass Amherst. I work in the Technology Transfer Office here. I'm the interim director. And I'm just here to learn. I'd never heard about Equalize before, but I received an email from Autumn and have been encouraging some of our female faculty to apply. So looking forward to hearing more.
Fantastic. Thank you for being here. Glad those Autumn emails aren't just being overlooked. That's really helpful.
Yep, yep.
Thank you so much. Okay, Wayne?
Great. Well, thank you, everybody. I'll do a quick introduction. Wayne Embry, Executive Vice President for Investment and Venture Development at Rev1 Ventures in Columbus, Ohio. I've been involved in seed stage venture investing and advising since the mid-1980s with a high emphasis on spin-outs from research institutions. At this point, I've been involved with close to 100 spin-outs. And as an old friend of mine once said, that's enough to know better. But I keep doing it. And so it's one of the most rewarding things I can think of. Otherwise, I would have to get a real job. I really like the cross-section of people attending. This will be fun. And the way we've done this in the past, please fire off questions as you have them, because this is really meant to be a discussion, not a lecture. If we could do this all in a group setting, I wouldn't be using PowerPoint at all. So, looking forward to the conversation. Real quick, Rev1, we're a venture development organization. For those of you in WashU, BioSTL is a sister organization of ours. We know the team there very well. We're more broadly focused from an industry sector perspective. About 30% of what we do are life sciences. Another 30% is in enterprise information technology. Then everything else kind of falls into advanced manufacturing, advanced materials, energy and power systems, food and ag tech. As we said, our mission is to help entrepreneurs build great companies, because it's the entrepreneurs and the inventors that are doing this work. We're here to help guide them to what we think are best practices and ideally to a good outcome. As a startup studio, we focus on identifying and addressing knowable unknowns. And when you look at a raw startup, the key risks fall into kind of these 5 areas. The product or technology, the market, the business, the team, and then capital needs a company might have. The thing that's interesting is at very, very early stages, all of these are knowable. Now, they're not infinitely knowable because, the world changes, and the markets change, but you can know a great deal about your customers before you ever start building a product. And in fact, that's our advice to all entrepreneurs is understand your customers, understand the market need, understand how products go to market in the sector that you're serving before you begin building the product. And we got lots of wonderful examples of that over our career with our colleagues here. And so we like to tell people that we're pathologically focused on customers. And when I meet with faculty, one of my first questions is, tell me who your first customer is. It's not a hypothetical question. I want to know who's going to be interested in the product on which the technology is based. And so the first thing we try to get people to do is eliminate the word technology from their vocabulary. So if they're focused on commercializing a product, commercializing a technology, we want them to be focused on a product. So that means you need to understand it from a customer's lens and understand things about the business. Now, we're not expecting the faculty to be the business leaders. We've got a few cases over my career where people made that transition and did it well. But we want there to be an appreciation for the market need, and how to talk to customers, because that's something that everybody involved with the startup needs to know how. So we're so focused on this because some great research by CB Insights in direct surveys with entrepreneurs of failed startups found that roughly half of startups failed because there was actually no market need for the product that they were trying to take to market. They hadn't really gone out and analyzed how people were going to use the product. Relatively straightforward things like price and cost issues, what's the right business model, and then what kind of quality is expected from customers in the product, in the market segment you're serving. So when you throw all these things together, you look at this and go, well, this is all things you could have found out before you spent your Aunt Matilda's money, your money, or other investors' money. So we want to make sure people have an appreciation for what it means to go and talk to customers. And so we actually teach a workshop that's the day one of it's underway right now, called Customer Learning Lab. And over the course of the year, we'll run this workshop 5 to 6 times. And it's 3 days, 3 very intense days. And we'll typically have somewhere in the neighborhood of 15 or so PIs from one of the research institutions attend one of these workshop sessions to better understand how to go about customer identification, validation, and qualification. And so while it's only a 3-day workshop, and we don't expect it to be absolutely definitive in terms of the information that's going to come back from it, it is directional. And if people really approach it with intellectual honesty, we view success as, I validated that there are people in the market that would be interested in my product. But success is also, I validated that nobody cares. And so we want to be able to see both of those. And unfortunately, a lot of things are in the middle. So that means the entrepreneurs or the PIs need to go do more work to better understand how they're positioning their product to a potential marketplace. So when we run this program, we have just 2 goals. One's to validate the problem, and the other is to validate the customers. You can't do one without the other. So you really need to understand, is there a problem that somebody needs to solve? Or the other way that I often turn this, is there an opportunity that is, to date been unrecognized? And I apologize for the language, but it's because I've heard it a few times. It's the holy shit moment when a potential customer says, you can do that? Now, in many cases, the entrepreneur didn't even know that their product did that, whatever that is. And I just came from one of our material science companies that does joining of and welding of polymeric plastics and carbon fiber. and they kind of discovered some things themselves, which now will lead to new IP that will improve fundamental manufacturing and higher speed processing for these kinds of materials. And so it's those kinds of moments that are just wonderful. But even though it's that, you can do that, it's seeing how that gets implemented, in a customer's process, in a customer's value proposition to their market. So it's not just understanding, how your customer would necessarily use your product, but how does it fit into their business? How does it improve their profit margin? How does it improve their image in the eyes of the customer? So really thinking through that is really important. And so that's all part of the validating the customer process. And this is not a one and done. This is, because markets don't stand still, competitors don't stand still. It's an iterative process. So it goes on and it has to be continuously repeated. And that's why marketing professionals are in such high demand, especially good ones. And there's a need for them in startup companies. So I'm going to talk about customer relationships and how they evolve. And this is primarily focused on the life sciences, but those of you that are working in physical sciences, you'll see the connections as well. So we always ask people in a group where we can see people raising hands, who's received grants from the feds, from states, from foundations. Those are all customer relationships. So a lot of times, people in the academy think, well, I don't understand this customer stuff because I don't have customer relationships. Well, yeah, we actually do, and have a lot of them. It's just how you think about it and how you look at it from the point of view of, does somebody have a particular need? Well, all these organizations have grant money, but they have programs, they have projects, they have specific things they're trying to accomplish. And so you're providing them with the tools, the resources, the information to fulfill their particular needs. And so the next phase of these customer relationships, when you think about it from life science or any regulated organization, is then that decision to commercialize. So based on the findings and the information coming out of the research that you've done, a recognition that there may be a commercial need for this technology as a product in the market. So working with the Tech Commercialization Office, working with the USPTO and the other patent offices around the world, commercialization funders. So again, back to the feds and programs like the Small Business Innovative Research Program or STTR programs, and a lot of private foundations, which are increasingly funding early commercialization. The FDA, getting reimbursement. All of these are customer relationships as well. So being able to navigate these organizations and their processes involve getting to know people, getting to understand their needs, getting to understand the motivations and how to meet those needs early on, so that you'll learn from the early engagement with them, and you decrease the likelihood that you make mistakes, especially with organizations like the FDA. So you're all very familiar with this, the whole scientific process. Making an observation, asking a question, forming the hypothesis. So this is all just embedded in all of your, at the cellular level. And so, when you think about customer validation and market validation, it's no different than the scientific method. And so we're gonna take a little example here to look at it through the lens of customer discovery as opposed to initial inquiry. So making an observation, and this example, that there are unmet clinical needs for new drugs in treating pancreatic cancer. Now, that could come from fundamental research. It could come from hallway conversations with colleagues. It could come from any number of sources. But identifying that there are increasing needs and demands for certain kinds of treatments. And then, so you can ask the logical question, and ideally you ask these questions from people who are more knowledgeable than you may be, or who can validate what you know. So in many cases, some of you are, the pinnacle of your field, and may be viewed as the key opinion leader in your particular field. You still want to go ask somebody else. It's always, you want to have, your thoughts, your assumptions validated, especially when it comes to commercial markets. And so, the question here is, are there documented need for a new product in this marketplace? How's it delivered? What kind of stage? Cancer? Are there reimbursements for it? And then we have examples I'll talk to you about that. And so the hypothesis in this case would be potentially a new product, a new treatment. It could be, simply a new method of delivery of an old product. And so one of the favorite things that I've done over my career, people who've created what we refer to as retreads, is drugs, targeting a new indication because they've identified either a different mechanism for delivery, or a timed delivery. A company we just recently invested in is found a new way to deliver drugs for macular degeneration. So to prolong the release dynamics of those drugs, so you reduce the number of times that people are being injected in their eyes for treatment for those diseases. So if that's successful, they'll be in a position where they can work with any of the companies that are producing and marketing those drugs for macular degeneration and related indications. And then, as you go through product development, you're testing the hypothesis, in multiple ways. And in the case of drug development, you're testing it in vivo, in vitro, and then eventually through the FDA process in clinical trials. And then, the process of iterating on the hypothesis. So this is really testing things before building, but as you're going through, your own inquiry, it's finding the ability to have independent validation of the findings. And this is where, unfortunately, the vast majority of life science opportunities fail, is they were not successfully independently validated before somebody tried to actually take them through full preclinical and then clinical development. So it's really important to identify individuals that can validate the work that you've done independently, who can replicate your work and do it in a way that that others, especially non-specialists, will find compelling. And really, it's only at the point when customers say yes is when you really want to start building a product. It's just trial and error is just too expensive. And so really understanding what people will buy, how they will pay, how they will use are really important. So I'm going to pause here for a sec. Any questions? Okay.
I've got one, Wayne, maybe you can help.
Yeah.
So, and if the audience is more life sciences centric, please forgive me. But when I think about some of the hard tech markets, where serving a customer with your technology may actually be through intermediaries, and those intermediaries might not actually be very motivated business-wise to see your technology succeed. How do you get customer input for those kinds of scenarios where it's an indirect kind of play?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's one of those where you've got to kind of seek out people that are very knowledgeable in the field. So it may not, in some cases, because of the way certain markets are controlled, be able to get to the right person. So what you might want to do is go after people that are recently retired, so they're no longer part of the food chain, the active food chain. and be able to interview them and get their opinion.
Yep.
Yeah, a lot of you are probably familiar with I-Core. I-Core wants the participants to interview 100 customers, and that really kind of is a magic number. But we also recognize that in certain fields, it's hard to find 100 customers. A company that we invested in my very first fund in the Pacific Northwest was a company called FEI. And so these are the folks that make electron and ion beam focusing equipment, as well as electron microscopes. At the point we invested in the company, they had not yet built their first focused ion beam system for the semiconductor industry. They were only building replacement parts. The founder of the company was a physics professor from a small college, and he found that the aftermarket components for the pieces of equipment that he used were unsatisfactory to his standards, and so he started making his own, started selling them, and then sold some systems or some equipment to Intel Labs. And he was observing a process at the labs one day when they were going in and out of different vacuum chambers to test and evaluate some very expensive semiconductors. And he asked him, why that wasn't being done with a single piece of equipment that was with one vacuum chamber. And they said, because it doesn't exist. And after a series of conversations, he literally had sketched out and then sold them 4 $800,000 pieces of equipment before he ever built it. And then the company maintained that kind of customer inquiry, customer validation throughout the entire life of the company. Thermo Fisher bought them a few years ago. We had people doubt that was going to turn out to be a very good investment. We got 7.5 times our money back after about 7 years. And then Thermo Fisher paid $4.2 billion for them when they sold the company. And so it's a little bit of a long-winded answer to your question, Paul, because what they had to do is they had to sort of ingrain themselves into a industry that is notorious, the semiconductor industry, notorious for only working with certain suppliers and certain vendors. And so they had to find kind of the back door in. That back door was through the R&D part of the business. So those are the folks that are using experimental equipment, using experimental methods. And so they were able to identify like-minded people, let's put it that way, and able to have very open conversations. And then to exploit those in a positive way, exploit those relationships to learn more about how the needs of the business and how they could meet those needs. Does that help?
Absolutely. It just reminds me that sometimes you just need a lot of patience and consistency in application of your efforts.
Yeah, patience is a wonderful theme. We should work that into the into the program. So, as I was mentioned earlier, when we talk about problem and solution statements, it's really, have the data been independently validated? And in the several hundred opportunities that I've worked on over my career, I can only think of one where I suspect any kind of, call it questionable ethical behavior on the part of an investigator. The things that didn't work, and it's a relatively small number, weren't because people weren't trying or didn't have the best intentions. It's just, this is the way, early product development and cutting edge science just turns out sometimes. Sometimes it just doesn't work. But once you have a set of results that look very, very promising, getting those reproduced and showing that it can be replicable is going to go a long way towards convincing potential investors, including grant making sources, that you're worth backing. So defining problems and solutions so you can understand the opportunity. And I'm not going to read this. You all can probably figure out what this is. But this is not uncommon. We see even entrepreneurs, describing their problem, as described here. And then the next slide. So the solution: inactivated virus, intramuscular, intradermal injections, prevents the virus from spreading, PV 60 to 7% effective, PV 2 and 3, 90% effective. Sounds great. Nope. This is how you put people to sleep. And invariably, if you're talking to investors or more lay individuals, they'll ask you what the hell you're talking about. So this is actually what you're talking about. In 1952 alone, more than 58,000 kids were infected with polio and 3,000 will die. And caring for them costs hundreds of millions of dollars every year. And so the solution was an injectable vaccine that's 90% effective and will save at least 2,700 lives. And within 2 to 3 generations could eradicate the disease. So that's a much more compelling way to tell the story. And this is the good thing about the Equalize program is, being able to bounce, what it is you want to do off people that have heard, dozens, if not hundreds, of people explaining, technology and technology solutions, and finding a concise, straightforward way to explain things. So you want to avoid jargon and buzzwords unless the jargon is absolutely, important to the message you're conveying. And that does happen. I mean, there are things that are, it's important to distinguish between, an antibody and a small molecule, between something that, borders on violating the laws of physics, and doesn't violate the laws of physics. So you want to make sure that you use the right terms and phrases that people can understand. And so painting the picture and humanizing the situation really makes it easy for people to understand what your point is, and then you've also captured their interest, and then you can bring in facts and statistics to support what you've told them first. So it's always good to marry those two together, but capture their interest at the very beginning. And then with a solution statement, do the same thing. You personalize the solution in a way that's meaningful to the audience that you're addressing, and then give them the facts and stats that support your solution and its ability to be efficacious, to be effective, to be cost effective. So we're going to move to talking about users and buyers. So your customers are, people ideally they're going to buy your product and they're going to use it, but they're two groups. And especially when you look at the life sciences and you look at a lot of things, even in the physical sciences, the user and the buyers are not the same. And that creates a real challenge in many cases, because you can have a very enthusiastic potential user, but you're not able to get it through the buying channel. So you have to figure out how to work with both, and how do you identify the drivers for each. So our team here just loves this example. So many of us either have kids or been around kids, and so we can recognize this moment as the buyer, the parents, the mobile for the baby. It's just wonderful until you look at it from the baby's perspective. So thinking about how things are viewed by the users and the buyers are really important. And the user may have no information whatsoever about the cost or the cost structure of using a product. And so it's really important that you're able to convey that message to the people who do make those decisions. And so when we think about, your customers and your market, you kind of look at it from the perspective of these 5 elements. So who's using your product and how do they use it? The buyer is the person that pays for the product, and like I said, in many markets it's rarely the same. There are channel partners, so who distributes the product to the users and the buyers. And there are some market segments, some industries where you're almost prohibited from selling directly to the end user. So you got to know how those marketing channels work. And Paul's question really gets to the heart of the matter. In many cases, channel partners that are doing a very good business with somebody else may not want competitors in the market. It may disrupt their business, not to mention that some of their customers' businesses. So understanding how those channel relationships work are really important. The suppliers, so who provides the raw materials for your products, and what are the terms and conditions, the availability, the quality, all of those kinds of things with respect to supplies. And then competitors. As we'll talk about later, everybody has competitors, and the one you have to understand the best is what's the status quo. What do people currently use? What is their expectations around the leading product in your field that you're going to be going head to head with, and really understanding it. So how many of you have seen target product profiles before? Okay. So a target product profile accomplishes a couple of things from my perspective as an investor. It tells me what are the key milestones, key things that a team has to accomplish to fully understand the product, how it's going to be made, how it's going to be regulated, how it's going to be paid for, reimbursed, and what are the issues associated with the product. Now, this is by no means carved in stone. These should be a little bit dynamic depending on the nature of your underlying technology, the market you're addressing, the indication that you're going after, and what you're going up against, if there really are competitors, and how do you compare to those. And so this also then becomes a market competitive matrix at one level. And so understanding these things and being able to talk about it are really important. It doesn't mean you necessarily know the answer, but being able to describe how you're going to go about finding the answer is what's important at the early stages. So under things like the mechanism of action, the FDA is going to want to know that. Investors are going to know it, and so the sooner you can understand, how a pharmaceutical does what it does, the better for the odds of commercializing it successfully, because it's also going to affect, how you make it. It's also going to affect things like, what side effects the drug may have, things like black box labeling, and it's going to affect the full manufacturing process. And so, understanding all these things because they fit together like a mosaic. And then understanding how incumbent products currently work as well is going to be very important, and how you compare to those. So there's a lot of work that goes into this. And so getting early exposure to it is really, really important. So one of the things we did last year, took a shot at, was, something we're all pretty familiar with right now, which is COVID. And this was one of those middle of the night ideas I got about doing a competitive matrix based on what we knew at the time regarding the available vaccines. I was actually part of the Pfizer BioNTech clinical trial, and I'm now part of BioNTech's clinical trial for the Delta variant. So it's been very interesting to be on the subject side of the line as opposed to the working with the companies that are getting drugs developed and moving them in. So what we want to do is really look at the available drugs that were coming onto the market and are now all of these are approved, and what are the pluses and minuses of these drugs. And it's like one of the things we learned, Johnson & Johnson, is even though I think the data is still a little fuzzy, it's probably likely there should have been a 2-dose vaccine as well, as opposed to just a single dose based on some of the data that I've seen. And the other thing I haven't included in here with respect to effectiveness is what's the half-life of the antibody production for the vaccines. We know now that Pfizer BioNTech, after 6 months, there's a pretty steep drop-off. So anyway, this is a way to look at a competitive matrix when you compare yourself to other products that are on the market that you would be competing against.
Say, Wayne, I was wondering, how do you determine what should be the list in the competitive matrix, and how many should you contemplate?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I wish I could give you a straightforward answer. So the thing you want to focus on are what are the key features, this one's a little busy in the sense that there's I think 8 or 9 features here, and part of that was just because it was so topical. But generally, when you think about any product and the key features, and that's really where the distinguishing aspects of the product, not the benefits. We're going to give you this drug; it's going to make you feel better. That's a benefit. The key features are things related to tangible measurement that you can assign to that particular category. So things like delivery method, side effects, hospital rate, complications. Those are really kind of features associated with the particular drug. But as a general rule, I'd try not to go more than a half a dozen because it just starts becoming overwhelming. So from that perspective, this is a bit of a bad example. But you do want to capture the major competitors that you have, because there's always going to be some that you don't know about. And like I said, you also want to make sure that you're capturing insights into what's the status quo. And so, you think about an example that I use a lot for people developing new office automation enterprise software products. We'll ask them, what do they consider the status quo? And the one thing they almost always forget is Excel. So the average office worker knows how to use Excel. It's already on their computer. It's ostensibly free. It's transferable amongst all of their colleagues. So if you're going in saying, I'm going to provide you with this cool AI-driven data analytics package, you're going to be competing against the macros that they've already put into an Excel worksheet, and explain to them why they should pay you $50,000 a year for that when Excel is free. So really understanding how your customers work and how your product can change that that work environment, their efficiency, their effectiveness is really important. And these competitive matrices can help you do that. So you'll hear this a lot from folks like us. If you have no competitors, you have no market. It's that simple. Everybody's got competitors. I can't think of an example yet of anybody I've run across where when the entrepreneur said we have no competition, they could absolutely demonstrate that was true. it's just a fundamental flip side of markets, is that there are customers have figured out some way to address the problem that they are working with that you think your product's going to solve for. So really understanding that's going to be important. So two other things, especially in not just in the life sciences, but any business that's regulated. If you have a regulatory process, there's also usually a reimbursement or funding side of that payment part of it. And if your product is regulated and it's not approved by the regulatory agency, you're not going to get paid. And if you can't demonstrate your ability to get through regulation, the people who do reimbursement aren't going to bother talking to you about paying for your drug. So you got to have both of these. And so the reality is you kind of have to work on them simultaneously to understand your timing getting into the market. Because in many cases, there may be already payment codes available for a drug or a medical device that you want to bring into the market that you can slot into, and that's great. But if you need a brand new reimbursement code, that's a long, hard process that's on par with getting through FDA approval. So really you want to make sure that you've got first-rate advisors for both the regulatory process as well as the reimbursement process, because mistakes in either one of these can actually kill a business.
Can I ask something? In the previous matrix, the competition one there, because all of these different vaccines, they are tackling the same or have a similar approach. Are they all in the same reimbursement code, and that's why there is not a reason why not to compare them in that way, or how it works, but it's not included, let's say?
Yeah, that's a fabulous question, and it shows the fallacy of my example, because up until recently, at least in the U.S., the federal government was reimbursing everybody for getting the vaccine. So I think the equivalent may be the think about the flu vaccines, and so most people that have health insurance, their insurance covers the vaccines, flu vaccines, 100%. And so I think other good examples would be looking at medical devices and what percentage of those are available for reimbursement, and how that reimbursement is handled. And so you think about any kind of disposable scope that's used in surgery now, those are typically reimbursed up to a certain level. But then you also have how do you calculate your reimbursement if you have, for example, only a partially disposable product as opposed to a 100% disposable product. So that's where you need to bring in ringers, professionals. They can advise you on the reimbursement codes, how those are used, how individual hospitals use them, because there is, one of the problems that we have in healthcare in the US is there is not consistency across group purchasing organizations, across individual hospitals, across insurance plans for how much they reimburse and for which things.
Thanks. And just the last one, with the same thing, is the severity of the disease also taken in account in there? Because in this case, COVID is you just treat you're infected or not, or you are sick or not. But if you have a disease that has moderate, severe, and different, you have a target population that is not equal, right?
Yeah.
I guess does it also play a role there? And how do you decide? Okay, I will treat these ones and maybe not these ones, or I will target one population and not the other with my product.
Yeah, and thanks for amplifying your question, because a good example there, I'm going to stop sharing. A really good example in that case is the whole gene therapy world. And so we've been involved with about a half a dozen gene therapy companies. 3 of them actually have drugs in the market. One of the companies, the initial drug was targeting a disease called Batten's disease, which is a horribly debilitating neurological condition, and starts affecting children when they're between 18 and 24 months old, and then they deteriorate over the next 8 to 10 years. And the CEO of the company began very early in his conversations with insurance companies, and because the only other treatment was an enzyme replacement therapy that required putting 2 shunts in the back of the head, and you literally replaced these 2 enzymes, I think every other month. That cost about $800,000 a year for that treatment, not including travel expense, lodging expense, and other care that was required, because all it did was just slow the rate of decay for the child. And so early conversations with insurers said, 2 million, 3 million, because the lifetime value is so much lower in comparison to with a known treatment. And that's part of the logic that Avexis and Novartis went through with Zolgensma, because that was priced at 1.5 million. It was what is the difference between a treatment which will arrest the disease and a lifetime of basically just a therapeutic approach. So it's really understanding how things are paid and reimbursed. But now the problem is a colleague of mine going through treatment for a condition, and they're pretty confident that the newest drug on the market is the one that's going to work for him. But the insurance company says until he's failed 2 other drugs, you can't get the new drug. So that's just insurance companies' rules. So it's a sticky, gooey ball of intertwined variables, some of which you can control and others that you can't.
Thank you.
Other questions? I know we're at the hour, so if people have got to go, I certainly understand.
Okay, seeing none. Thank you, Wayne. I think that was very helpful. Some good questions, a lot of feverish note taking, and we will send the PDF out to everyone who registered for today as well.
Great. And my email address is on there. So if you have questions, by all means, send me an email. Happy to discuss things further.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.